Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back with me, LP Cruz. And tonight we're talking Cowboys football. Um, as everybody knows by now, the Dallas Cowboys were beaten by the Packers pretty soundly in a game where they were favored to win, but got embarrassed by Green Bay through the air, on the ground, in so many different ways. In fact, they were beaten so bad that Kyle Shanahan was preparing for the Packers in the second quarter. So instead of talking about the game, which is that game's been discussed ad nauseum, so I'm not going to go through film or go through a lot of different stats from the game. But I do want to talk about what the loss means for the Cowboys and what has to change moving forward, because that's the theme here. The team has to change. They have to progress from that loss. And really, I want to start with the players because I think it's all about the players. We can talk about the coaching staff, which I definitely will, but it all starts on the field. And not so much what's on the field, but what's in the head of the players after. So after the game, and just for disclaimer's sake, I'm going to talk about a lot of what social media is saying about the Cowboys, what I'm seeing on social media to make my points because they are valid and accurate points. And the one thing I can kind of say about this game and the aftermath of the game is looking at what the players have said following the game or what they've done before the game. It tells me one thing, one really negative detail, and that is with these players, they would rather stand on brands than stand on business. And what I mean by that is I feel like the brands of the players have superseded the focus. It's superseded the importance of actually a playoff game. And the first example I have is there was an exchange with Nashawn Wright and a fan following the game. And, in so many words, Nashawn Wright questions really, the validity of the fans' claims and really looks at it from what I think is a very short-sighted lens. And I'm going to post the tweets here. But the interaction, it doesn't speak to any type of, in my opinion, any kind of real responsibility or real acceptance of what the game means. And even the players talked about it. It might have been CeeDee Lamb who said that the players want a Super Bowl more than the fans do. I don't believe that when I see these interactions with players and the fans. I don't buy into that. Again, I feel like the brands are over the business. And the interaction, which I also responded back to Nashawn Wright, and I said that there's no need to defend yourself online. No need to defend your performance online because we already saw it and it already just speaks for itself. There's no need to go online and defend yourself from what happened or defend the team or your teammates because really, in reality, you could have defended your teammates on the field on Sunday and you didn't do it. So there's no need to go back and talk to fans in any type of way to defend your actions because, again, actions will speak a lot louder than words. And right now it's deafening with what this team has to look forward to, or even the fans have to look forward to in the playoffs because, once again, they crash and burn. And again, sticking with the theme of the brand over the business and standing on brands over your business, the one kind of beacon to that the fans have latched onto, and I want to speak for the fans, the one beacon that they've latched onto for that idiom or that ideal is Micah Parsons. He's a very visible figure. He's a very talented player and a very talkative player. And people will point to the podcast. And at first, I didn't mind the podcast. The podcast to me wasn't really consequential. But what it has become, I think, is, and it's not just Parsons. I think a lot of players have podcasts. You have Micah Parsons who has a podcast. You have Fred Warner who has a podcast. Darius Slay, the Kelsey brothers, even in the NBA, Draymond Green, Paul George. So many guys have podcasts. And I want to be clear when I say this. I will never tell a player to not make their money, to not do what you have to do. I won't say don't get endorsement deals. I won't say don't make appearances. Get paid. I mean, it's a business. Get paid, obviously. But I do think that this speaks to a lot of athletes, and Parsons would be included in this. When I watch other athletes perform nowadays, these players are very conscientious of their brands. They're very conscientious of what's said about them and how they're perceived through the media. We've heard the term now a lot, new media, which is really athletes shanghaiing the media and now setting the narrative forward for themselves versus letting the networks do it. Your CBSs, your NFL networks, your Foxes, they pretty much are beating them to the punch and they're telling their own stories to the fans in their own way, which again, in theory, that's not really an issue for me, or at least it wasn't an issue. But when I watch these sporting events, these players are able to rattle off their stats walking off the field or walking off the basketball court. And again, I think it's because these players understand what might be said about them from that perspective. And I think the true nature in this is whether you do your podcast on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, it doesn't really make a difference whenever it's done because I feel like the natural human element is to, one, defend yourself, And two, if you're aware of what's being said about you and you know your stats, I feel like that has to have a trickle effect into walking into the game on Sunday. I feel like people know, fans are aware of what's happening. Fans know the score and they know the stat line. And I think in some ways that bleeds into your performances a little bit. And I think for some players who aren't equipped to handle that, you can have that. And again, it's where the brand supersedes the actual production on the field. So I think that's an issue that I have with it. And again, I don't have an issue with the podcast itself, but I do feel like the attitude in that could permeate what you see on the field. And if it's not Micah Parsons, I do think, and I want to share this tweet that I saw as well, which was a image of a after party that's being hosted by Sam Williams and Kevontae Turpin on Sunday night. When I think about what this team and their mentality and what has to change, I do think, again, it's the brand over the business. And I do think there's a sense of entitlement from these players who have not won anything. And that's what really triggers and bothers fans, that these players they take this for granted. They take a lot for granted. And I'm speaking from the fan perspective, but they take a lot for granted what these fans do and what they pour into this team. And we have things like this, of hosting a party the same night of a game that you expected to win. It just speaks to the level of respect for not only the Green Bay Packers, but the respect for the fans as well. And that's what bothers a lot of people about this. And for Turpin, obviously he should know a lot better. But Turpin is a contributor to this team, and a good contributor when given the opportunity as a return specialist who's been to the Pro Bowl, as somebody who has a role in the offense as a gadget player, but still an important role. When it comes to Sam Williams, there's not much that he can do worse. And what I mean by that is, on the field, there's things that happen that really need to be ironed out as far as the maturity with the penalties of, hey, Sam, do not rough the kicker. Hey, Sam, do not, as the gunner, run down there and knock over the return player. Like, those things of the football maturity with Sam Williams are already a big talking point about him. But secondarily, the maturity off the field, as we know, with the incidents off the field or whatever the case is, this is just another one in the next chapter. It's just the awareness of not focusing on that when you have a playoff game. And it just speaks to, again, a sense of entitlement for guys on this team, on this roster, who have not achieved that level of success. And that's where you draw the ire. And then there's another image I'm going to show you right now with another party that's being hosted on Saturday. It just tells me a lot about this team. It tells me a lot about where these players are in their heads and what they take for granted that we as fans don't. And that, I think, is an issue. That really is an internal issue with these fans and these players, because there's this disconnect now of the fans and the players and the trust between both, which I'll touch on a little bit later on. And I think more so how that affects the coaches and what that means from the coaches. And I'll talk about both McCarthy and Dan Quinn. But with McCarthy, it just says that there's an aspect of leadership that's not being fulfilled by the head coach. Now we have, for the second time in the last 3 years, where the team was not prepared for a playoff game, and that falls on the head coach. You have the incidents in 2021 where the team, as he said, was scared to play against the Niners at home in the playoffs. And then you have Sunday. So I have 2 cases in 3 years of a home team not prepared to play a home playoff game. And with the context of the Cowboys have not lost at home in the last 16 games, it just speaks of a lack of preparation and a lack of taking it seriously. And it stems from the players in their personal dealings off the field, but also the head coach as a motivator and as the head coach to lead the team. That is a major flaw, and it's now 2 out of the last 3 years. And to go back to social media, this tweet by Duffy, it speaks to a lot of the negligence in Mike McCarthy. For starters, the run game was not going to work because it hasn't been working. Why McCarthy would insist on the running game anyway was stupid. By all reports that we had out there, it said to attack the Packers. And again, this shout to David Howman on Blogging the Boys. In his report, it said to attack the Packers through the pass in the middle of the field. He had one big play of Jake Ferguson in the middle of the field, but that wasn't the focus anymore. The intent was to run the football on second and short and get shafted for doing it. And again, they gave you the blueprint. Everyone said it, but McCarthy would not listen and said he wanted to run the football. So that's another major flaw. Then we have Dan Quinn on the defensive side. And there's been so many cut ups online, so many talking points about that as far as the personnel groupings against what they were facing. There's one tweet that I saw that kind of posted that the Cowboys are sitting in a base nickel defense and Green Bay's playing a 12 personnel, asking, even the alignment was terrible, but asking for them to run the ball on them. And you have Quinn who's playing with literal light boxes. And this is what happens when you have 200-pound safeties to fill the run and fill their run fits as linebackers. And it's even worse when they don't want to maintain their gap assignments. You had a lot of guessing and a lot of guys who were in the fit, jumped out of the fit, gave a big runs, just didn't look comfortable at all in what they were being asked to do. And it just kind of take you back to when you had Jalen Smith, who was just not playing the gaps, and speaks to the coaching staff. Are these things being talked about? Are these things being addressed? Because it happened early in the game, where it was happening early enough to where you could have went back and said, hey, let's talk about this. Let's address this. Not just that, but even the play calling on defense, where you have this whole intent. And it was talked about during the broadcast by Greg Olson, talking about how their forte is man coverage, yet you abandoned that principle to run zone. And there were so many busted coverages in the secondary. And it looks like these were not, again, there's that word again, not prepared to play what they were being asked to do. And it just tells me that Dan Quinn did a couple different things, which is he underestimated Jordan Love as a passer from the pocket, and he overestimated his pass rush, because there really is no other example. There really is no explanation to what led to those choices. And as far as changes go, when it comes to Quinn, I am totally open to whatever you want to do there. I'm totally open to a change. I'm not sure what direction to go in, but I'm open to it. And the reason for that is he's got a lot going on. Quinn has a lot of interviews lined up. I've heard the Commanders, I've heard the Seahawks. And just the misuse of your first round pick, Mozzie Smith, does not make any sense. You bring in Mozzie Smith to be a run stopper, a run stuffer in the middle of your defense, and you change his body type for some reason. And you basically drafted Mozzie Smith to be Jonathan Hankins, and then you have Jonathan Hankins anyway. And I saw a lot more Neville Gallimore than I was expecting to see in that spot. So it's almost like there was no real plan for Mozzie, when all of us kind of had an idea of, okay, he's your run stuffer, so he should be playing on the field in the capacity you drafted him to do that. And it wasn't happening there. It was things like dropping Micah in coverage, bad communication, again, in the busted coverages. It just seems like the defense needs something new. Like they need new leadership, because you have an issue with personnel, an issue with play calling, and then you have an issue with alignment. And there's just so much that goes into that. Now, when it comes to the head coach, McCarthy, if you want to let him go, also with that, I'm okay. If you want to move on from Mike McCarthy, I'm also okay. But my one thing that I want to kind of reserve with Mike McCarthy is this, and not about the wins, because it's great. Okay, you've won 36 games in the last 3 years, 3 straight 12-5 seasons. That's great. But the one thing I do want to hold on to with McCarthy is that he's done a lot of good to improve the passing game, and improve I don't want to say the offense, but improve the passing game, differing from the last regime with Kellen Moore. So they have gotten better in those aspects. My thing is, if you fire Mike McCarthy, the thing you want to do is retain those better aspects schematically of the offense, but rid yourself of the lack of preparation and the lack of motivation for your players in the most crucial moments when everything is on the line. And it's not impossible to ask this. I don't think it's a tall task to say, hey, look, I want you guys to marry the concept of a tough mentality going into games with creative play calling. It's not hard to ask. And my example for that would be the Detroit Lions. As a coach, or options that I want to look at Ben Johnson from Detroit, who has a lot of playmakers, who runs the football, who's diverse in what he's doing, whose playmakers are being asked to do a lot of different things. And again, watch Detroit all season. They have a very, very diverse set of play calls, and they use their players in a lot of different ways to open up more options in their system. And then I look at the other option that I've kind of posted on social media as well, is Dave Canales of Tampa. And he's their offensive coordinator. And the reason why I'm kind of keen on Canales is what he's done in the last 2 years with fixing Geno Smith for the most part. Geno Smith, I believe, was the comeback player of the year last year. And he really had a terrific showing in 2022. And also what he's done with Baker Mayfield. He's taken 2 quarterbacks that people have kind of written off and not been in support of. And to do that and transform their careers in the way that he has, I think he's just a coach who's ascending. And I like how he even called the plays, or called the game against the Eagles as well, where he ran the ball, used a lot of play action, ran the ball on second and short, took advantage of the Eagles, in every way possible. And the game should have been more of a blowout. For some people with Canales, they're going to point to the production of the offense and where they're ranked. I do think that stems more so from just the personnel. I think that stems more so from just miscues, drops, the running game not being effective based on who the runner is, but a very not good runner, but a good pass catcher. So I think there's ways around this, and I think he's better than what the stats say for Canales. So that's why I'm keen on him as well. But back to the defense. If Quinn is gone, I'm not sure what to do there, because there could be a reason to say, okay, we may want to go away from going to a 4-3 to a 3-4. And I think with that said, you should have all your possibilities open because of what the defense is doing. And really, it's how they're built to win. They're built to win in one certain way. And they're built to win by living and dying off the turnovers. And it's not often you say that a defense is one-dimensional, but which you typically reserve that commentary for offenses. But the defense seems to be one-dimensional, where they can only win a certain way. And that's not going to work either. And there's a lot of names going around for head coaches right now. And the names that are popping up, the people are endorsing and are approving are Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel. And for me, I don't want either option. I don't want Vrabel or Belichick. And the reason why is that for Bill, he still wants control. He still wants to have that control over a roster, over a draft. And I think old habits die hard. I think part of what happened in New England is that they saw the writing on the wall. They saw that he was not as adept at the control anymore, and that was it. And I think in Dallas, he would never be happy here. He would not like working for the Jones family. He would not like having to give control in a lot of different things. And that could be personnel control, that could be draft control, that could be how you talk to the media, how Jerry, please step away from the spotlight. I need to run my team, where it's just business only. I don't think he'd be happy here. So I don't think it's a good fit. As for Vrabel, I think Vrabel's philosophy is he wants to run the football. He wants to be physical in the trenches. But I think that even ideal is antiquated with what this team is. The Cowboys this year were not a good running team. And from the inside out, they didn't run the football very well. I don't think it's a schematic sense. I think it's more of a personnel sense. And I think it's that the offensive line is aging. And so your running offense is suffering because of it. So I don't think it's a good fit of Vrabel and where the Cowboys are right now with their personnel. So I think both guys are just not good fits based on what their demands are of the Cowboys and what the personnel dictates. It's just, I'm sure they're good options for other teams, just not for us right now. I just don't think I'm in on Vrabel or Belichick. And the last point I want to make, second to last point I want to make, is the big thing going around social media, how one player is being perceived. And the $60 million question right now for a lot of fans is Dak Prescott. From what he did on Sunday, even his most ardent supporters are done with him. They're finished. You have 2 interceptions with the pick six, and the pick six is the straw that broke the camel's back. At that very moment, people who have supported Prescott, had his back for so many years, that was it for them. I think they said enough is enough. We're done. And I'm speaking for the fans here, but enough is enough. They've had their fill. And the real problem is that there's a big cap charge for Prescott going into this year. He has a charge of $60 million for next season. And there's no way that that's going to happen for this team. They're over the cap by $16 million as we stand right now. So Prescott at 60 is not going to happen. And the only way around this is 2 options here. And the first option is the more nuclear option of you cut Prescott, you cut ties, he's gone, you just move on. Now, cutting Prescott means that the Cowboys have no real solution at quarterback. There's not a viable option they're going to hit. They're probably going to pick 24. I believe they do pick 24 in the draft. So there's not a real instant upgrade at 24. And I'm not going to entertain any type of talk about Cooper Rush or Trey Lance. That's not a serious option. It's not a real option to be competitive unless your plan is to bottom out. So if you're a person that is asking for a rebuild, and I mean a complete roster flush, you're done. You're not going to bring back Tyron Smith. You're just not bringing back Tony Pollard. You're saying forget this whole operation. Let it just fall to the ground. Let it burn to ashes. If that's the plan, then that's totally fine. You go with that plan. If you're going to go cold turkey, go with it. And I guess the plan is to hit the lottery on a quarterback. So if it's Quinn Ewers, Will Howard, or somebody in 2025, then that should be the plan, is to cut Prescott and not bother and just go raw, nothing left. And that's really what a true rebuild, if you're asking for a real rebuild, that's what it looks like. Now, the other option is to extend Prescott, which, again, speaking for the fans, they don't want to do this. The fans are over it. And the reason why they don't want to do it is the fans are, truthfully, they're tired. They're just tired of everything. They're tired of hoping for the best and being disappointed. They're tired of sticking up for Prescott, and he can't bring them a championship. And it's not just the fans that are tired. And it's not just the fans that are tired of the performances, the flat outings, because really what happened is this team was expected to win. The team was expected to compete beyond the wild card round, beyond the divisional, and they couldn't do it. And so not only are the fans tired and exhausted, so are the alumni. I want you guys to watch this monologue from Michael Irvin. Check it out.
I watch every damn where, all across this country, all across the league, they stood up to defend their city and defend their team, except in the city that deserved it the most. Except the team that's most recognizable and deserved it the most. What do you do when all you have don't understand what they have? When I got here, I understood the men before me. They built the Dallas Cowboys. They made this America's team. They put a championship on the table. Before I got here, my job while I was here is to match what they have done, because they built it. They handed it to me. Put my damn championship on the table. That's all we ask. Put your damn championship on the table, and you couldn't do it. All their asses gotta go.
For Prescott, he was kind of playing at a level. And mind you, Prescott this year was an all-pro. And he was starting to play into the level of gaining that respect from a national public perception, where the national guys were giving him his kudos. The national guys who hate on him incessantly were giving him his praise. And he was thought to be playing to the level of the truly elite quarterbacks in the NFL. And that performance on Sunday, of the interceptions, of the stagnating offense, that performance broke a trust with people that Prescott, I do not think he can ever win back with fans. And I mean that with people who are the most ardent supporters of Prescott. That game broke all the trust. I think he can never get back with those fans. And the truth of the matter, I think, when it comes to Prescott, the honest truth, like the real deal with Prescott, is somewhere in the middle of who he is. And I think the real truth with Prescott, to understand Prescott, is to understand the player from a physical standpoint, which I feel like in his whole career, no one quite understands Dak Prescott from a honest, grounded perspective. But I think this tweet, again, going back to Twitter, this tweet by Joey Ikes is the truth that I think I most identify with and I most agree with. And so basically what Joey is saying is that Prescott needs help from the coaching staff and his defense to reach his full potential. Because with Prescott, he doesn't have those elite traits that you see from his other quarterback counterparts. He doesn't have the top tier arm or the speed of a Prescott, or the speed of a Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar Jackson. He's not those guys. And so because of that, he requires more help from the coaching staff to give him more to work with, whether that's going to be more schematics of pick plays, whether it's more motion, whatever the case is, to create these windows for him to maximize and these reads to maximize, which again, he's a pretty good, intelligent quarterback in the pocket, pre-snap and post-snap. But the elite traits that he doesn't have, it lessens the margin of error for him and the team, where you do need a better defense and, again, better schematics to win these games. And the fact is, he can play in the S tier, but he can't stay there consistently because those physical limitations. And that's what it is. And when games are kind of difficult, games are kind of messy, and it takes one play to flip an entire game, Allen can do it, Lamar can do it, Mahomes can do it. Dak can do it, but it's far more infrequent than those guys, based on, again, those physical limitations. And that limitation applies to a lot of guys, not just Prescott. It applies to Kirk Cousins. It applies to Brock Purdy. The physical limitations are why you need more of a supporting cast because of that. So, can you win with Prescott? Excuse me. So the question is, can you win with Dak Prescott? Absolutely. It just requires more from the coaches. And the thing about Prescott, and a lot of fans will probably agree with this as well, is that he needs to demand more from his coaching staff. Where Prescott needs to ask for more, and needs to accept more, in the sense of, if the plan is not good, or the plan is too rigid, or the plan is to run the football here, or to establish a run when it doesn't work, Prescott needs to go back to the coach and say, no, we're not doing that. Or if it's not getting enough out of the system or out of the offense, he has to buck back more, I think. And I believe either he does or he doesn't. I can't say for sure, but the belief is that he's such a great team guy that he may not buck back against what's not a good system for him at times. And I think the last thing, though, I want to say is for the team and where they stand. I think the biggest thing to come out of this game, the biggest thing to come out of another playoff loss and an early exit, is it has exposed this real harsh reality of the tie between the current team, the fans, and the ex-alumni. And the real truth here is, and it's a sad truth, is that these fans will not buy back in to Prescott or this team. They're not going to go back in there. These fans will not be duped once again. And they have no reason to believe anything will be different, no matter what is said by the quarterback, the head coach, the owner. It's not going to be enough. And as somebody I know put it, the fans will not get back in the sidecar. The fans are not going to go along for a ride that they know nothing will change or nothing will be different. They have lost that investment in this team. And what's the most telling thing about this is, and I think the hardest pill to swallow for anybody who's around the team, whether you're a reporter, whether you're a content creator, a blogger, whoever the case is, the fact of the matter is, what the Cowboys have done over the last 25 plus years, and again, it's not all on the current head coach, it's not all on the current quarterback or these current players, but what this team has done by their failures over the last near 30 years is that what they've done is they've rendered everything, and I think even now, so it sticks even harder, they've rendered everything about the regular season totally meaningless. So no matter what they do from September through January, nobody will care. So no matter what they want to do at training camp, nobody cares. There's nothing that will buy these fans back in based on this game, because of they've rendered everything meaningless. Again, you have to acknowledge and understand it was supposed to be different. You got a favorable spot in the playoffs. You were the number 2 seed. You were going to host the divisional game likely at home, and you blew it. And the biggest part is, all the fans were asking for, go back to August, go back to March, April. The major benchmark that the fans were asking for was the NFC title game. That was it. That was the one thing. When you asked fans, you said to the fans, hey, what is that one thing they had to accomplish this year? What is the lowest task they had to accomplish to buy confidence in this roster or in this team beyond this season? And everyone will tell you they had to make the title game. They had to make the NFC title game finally, and they had the chance to do it. So now you sit here, and the sad part is Detroit is in a spot to make the title game, and it would make the Cowboys and the Commanders as the only teams in the NFC to not make the title game since 1995. And that's why fans are done, because nothing has changed. Nothing has been different with this team. The team has not delivered any results to change the minds of anybody over the last 30 years. And the apathy for this team is as real as it's ever been. And honestly, when it comes to the fans, I don't blame them. I honestly don't blame them. And actually, I join them in that sentiment now, because, again, you've now taken everything about the regular season and it means nothing. It's all about January. So you have basically 19 weeks of football, or 18 weeks of football, where nothing matters but January. And for many fans like myself now, we don't have anything to buy into. We don't have any expectations now. We're just going from week to week, watching the team play. But the overall investment with this team is never going to be the same. Not with the head coach, not with the ownership, and not with the quarterback. None of that now makes any difference until there's a real change. And if, again, if the team wants to change that on how they're perceived or wants to change how they're seen by everybody around the team, reporters, writers, media, whomever, bloggers, everybody, unless they want that to change on how they're perceived and how they're viewed, then they too have to change. But guys, anyway, thank you for watching. And as always, peace.